This is another day in music history we thought would never happen, but here we are. Today we just lost Ozzy Osbourne. The Prince of Darkness is no longer with us. When it comes to the face of heavy metal, there's no other person that has been one of the faces of that genre more so than Ozzy. I mean, you see him, we know him. Even if you're not really a metal fan, you know who he is, you know his face. You know, he's been a part of pop culture for decades. And of course, it all began when he was a part of this band, of course, Black Sabbath, of course, releasing their first album in 1970. And he played a big role in shaping the genre. Of course, you have Tony Iommi's guitar, Geezer Butler's bass, and Bill Ward's jazz-laden drums, but really Ozzy's unique vocal style just made him stand out from other vocalists during that time. And, you know, Ozzy's not like a trained singer by no stretch, but songs like Black Sabbath, like him putting on this like eerie, very dark, ominous tone to it, which definitely captured your attention. And throughout the album, just more so of that excellent darkness that the band were going for. And while this did really good, it wasn't until the second one where they really hit the mainstream. Of course, this album would kickstart so many big singles. You know, you have War Pigs, the title track, Iron Man, but even some other great songs like Electric Funeral, Hand of Doom, and Fairies Wear Boots. I mean, again, another one of the more important albums to really spearhead heavy metal. And of course, they would just continue on. Of course, Master of Reality. Then you have potentially my favorite Ozzy kind of led Black Sabbath album with Volume 4. Again, you have the ballad Changes I want to highlight, which again, that song, even though there's some people who's not a fan of Changes, really, Changes kind of really showcases there's more to Ozzy's vocals than just that, you know, that doom and gloom sort of sound. He can really put on a nice tender ballad if he really wanted to, and this is just one of those examples. But then the band would start to experiment. You have Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and the title track, just him showing like his high register. Like Ozzy could get very high. Many people give him credit for it, and again, I'm talking about the title track where he really is pushing it. But it's just excellent album. Another one of my favorites of this era of the band. Of course, Sabotage, which is going to be turning 50 pretty soon. Again, still experimenting more. But we all know the story. Eventually, drugs and alcohol were becoming rampant. It was really becoming an issue. You know, technical ecstasy is definitely the start of the end for this lineup of the band. And then when we get to Never Say Die, it's basically it at that point. The band basically fired Ozzy at that point, and now Ozzy's pretty much on his own. And again, you hear stories of how once he left Black Sabbath, he was pretty much at a low point. He figured that's the end of my career, and he could have died very, very early on, not long after that. But again, it came down to certain people, you know, Sharon Osbourne, of course, by that point it was Sharon Arden, but it was her insistence to kind of push Ozzy to go solo, and of course led to 1981's Blizzard of Oz. And of course this will become a big album for him as a solo artist, of course spawning many hit singles, most notably Crazy Train, which is a classic rock staple. I mean, I hear that song on the radio every so often when I do listen to classic rock radio. It's always one you always hear. But other songs like I Don't Know, Goodbye to Romance, Suicide Solution, Mr. Crowley. It's an excellent debut album. And of course his work with Randy Rhoads, his stuff with Legendary as well, which I also got to point out. And they would continue that on with the second album, Diary of a Madman, and this would be the last one with Randy before he would pass away pretty quick. I can't remember if this was before or after the album came out, but still some great stuff on this one. And of course they would release a live album, and it's even Randy Rhoads tribute. And you know, Ozzy would just continue to just flourish with his solo career. You know, you have Bark at the Moon, then you have The Ultimate Sin, which I shockingly don't have. But then after kind of, I wouldn't say he like fell off, but he kind of plateaued, I would say. But then he had a major comeback in the 90s with the album No More Tears, which had songs like the title track, Hellraiser. Then you have, of course, the ballad Mama, I'm Coming Home, which is another excellent power ballad. And then, again, I don't really have a ton of his solo albums, but I also want to showcase his, not his latest, but his second latest album from 2020's Ordinary Man, which I think is a pretty decent album. I think there's a lot of people who kind of don't talk highly of this album, but I actually really enjoyed this one. You have Straight to Hell, the title track featuring Elton John, Under the Graveyard, Today is the End. Just a pretty solid album in my opinion. And yeah, I also got to point out the Black Sabbath reunion album 13. Even though there's no Billboard here, you still got Ozzy on this one, and I think it's a pretty solid one. Some decent songs on this thing, produced by Rick Rubin. But again, going back to what I was saying about how Ozzy really kind of really blew up in the mainstream. Of course, all his other endeavors he was in. Of course, he was part of the Osbournes, the reality TV show, which was a pretty revolutionary concept for that time, having kind of showcasing a celebrity's family, and it would kind of spawn other reality shows in that vein. I know Gene Simmons would go on to have his own reality show, kind of similar to the Osbournes, and even Eddie Money, which is kind of weird, but it was really Ozzy and his family who kind of started the whole thing. And I have seen clips of the reality show, and it definitely does show, like, even though Ozzy is the rock star, you know, he's done all these crazy stories, you know, biting the head off a bat, you know, pissing at the Alamo and other notorious things, snorting ants apparently, but you kind of see that reality show, and you kind of see you do see a different side of him, just being like a family man, not your traditional family man, but you definitely see he does care a lot about his family, his kids, even his wife, even though I know they have many ups and downs. And even, you know, he was a grandfather. I've seen clips of him with grandchildren, and they always seem to enjoy his company. You do see he is a very gentle and just a really nice person to get to know. And probably the one more thing I'll probably mention, like, he definitely also kind of is a good example of rock stars who suffered decades with alcohol and drug abuse, but then he would somehow he was able to get through it. And again, we could have lost him like years ago, but he somehow managed to live on to 76, which is a fairly good amount of time to be living for. And I know, again, he had a lot of health issues, which, you know, I've read that he really struggled with. So hopefully he was not in too much pain when he passed away. But again, he went through so many challenges, so many like things, many setbacks in life, but yeah, he was still managed to pull through and deliver to the fans that loved him and enjoyed everything that he did. And I just want to make this quick video to kind of showcase my appreciation for the Prince of Darkness himself. So to Ozzy Osbourne, rest in peace to the family, sending my condolences. And of course, to anybody watching this one, hopefully you can share your memories with Ozzy Osbourne and his music. And I'll see you next time in another video. Take care. Bye for now. Don't know why I'm still alive. Yes, the truth is